Welcome to our Google Plus Hangout, celebrating 125 years of National Geographic. A new age of exploration starts now.
Hello, everyone. We are very excited to have you join us for this special 125th anniversary of National Geographic. We're celebrating with a first for this Google Hangout. The first time we've been linked to all 7 continents. We've got National Geographic explorers around the world we'll be talking to, and you'll have a chance to ask them questions. National Geographic started 125 years ago this very day on our mission to inspire people to care about the planet. I'm Boyd Matson, and I'm moderating this. I'm a writer, journalist, explorer for National Geographic. I have not been here for all 125 years, but for a good portion of the last 20. And we want to take you around the world now to meet the people that have been here, some for a very long time, and some very new explorers, because the future of exploration, the best part, is still ahead. And that's what we're celebrating, a new age of exploration, as well as what we have accomplished to this point. We have Dr. Robert Ballard in the United States, undersea explorer, joining us. Jane Goodall is here, primatologist, one of our earliest National Geographic grantees, who's been doing major work on protecting and understanding chimpanzees. We are joined by Cecilia Mauricio in Peru, one of our newest archaeologists studying past cultures and what we can learn about the interaction between cultures and climate. Kirithi Karanth, conservation biologist in India. She's in Bangalore, but usually she's out tracking tigers around India. Paula Kahumbu from Kenya. Paula is the director of Wildlife Direct and also worked with our Big Cat Initiative. And Mike Archer in Australia, paleobiologist who studies dinosaurs' fossil remains, including dinosaur poop. I know you're going to have some question about fossilized poop. We also have our link to Antarctica, where our CritterCam team is. We're getting that link up. They'll be joining us shortly in the Google Hangout, and we'll be taking your questions. So if you want to send them in, you can join us by sending questions in on Twitter, YouTube, or Google Plus to hashtag NatGeo125, hashtag NatGeo125 with your questions. And as I said, exploration is really still out there, the best part of it. And you might ask, well, what's left to explore? We've been doing this for 125 years, and people were doing it even before. So, Bob, what's left that we don't know about, that we haven't seen on this planet?
Well, you know, ironically, most of the planet itself, I feel we're just beginning. Our explorations are starting to accelerate with our ships of exploration now. And I expect the next generation to explore more of Earth than all previous generations combined using this new advanced technology.
And Jane, Bob, of course, knows that he's in an area where a lot of people haven't been if you're exploring the ocean, but what about on land? Are there new things that people can look forward to seeing, or do you just go back to old places and learn new information about what we're familiar with?
Well, I think, you know, a lot of young students ask me what there is left to learn about. And after 50+ years, we're still learning new things about the same group of chimpanzees, using new technology to learn about, you can profile their genetics from DNA samples and learn who the fathers are. But then, you know, I've just finished a book about plants, and down under the soil, there's a whole new world of bacteria that we know nothing about.
I'll tell you, one place that we haven't done a lot of exploring just because of the harsh conditions is Antarctica. Said we were trying to get up the connection. We have now got the guys, our CritterCam team. I see them sitting down in Antarctica. We've got Greg Marshall, who is the developer of the CritterCam, Kyler Abernathy, who does a lot of the scientific work on the cameras, making them smaller and lighter and putting them on different animals, and Doug Krause, who is doing some leopard seal research in Antarctica. Hey, Greg, is it cold? Is it cold down there, guys? Okay, hey, Greg, why don't you go to your, wait, Greg, go to your computer. I think you're on mute. Hit the mute button there on the computer. We're seeing your lips move, but we're not hearing you talk. Here we are in great technology.
All right, let's try that again.
Now we hear you.
So we just got back from our first leopard seal recapture, and we recovered our first CritterCam deployment. So we're a little hot and sweaty, even though it's very cold down here. We did just a little jogging.
Is that the critter cam that you had on the leopard seal that you're holding up? Is that the size of what you put on it?
This is, yeah. This is the one we just recovered. And it ran overnight last night. We're trying to look at her underwater behavior at night, her hunting behavior at night.
I would say you're working in an area where we're really seeing the most advances in exploration, and that's developing new technology. So we can go back to something familiar and see it in a new way. And following a leopard seal where it goes has been impossible before. They're fast underwater and they're going deep, and now we just put the camera on them and let them take the pictures. Is that it?
Absolutely, this just was not possible before, but because of the investment that we make in National Geographic, the engineering team that we work with, we're able to take these cameras now and then ride into the world with these animals, whether it's leopard seals or blue whales or emperor penguins. It really gives us this amazing new insight into their behavior and ecology that we've never had a chance to look at before, and it's only possible because of this innovative new technology.
We get a lot of questions coming in from people about what's left on the Earth to explore, which we were hinting at before. And Mike, in Australia, you're going over land, and Jane alluded to this when she said we need to dig under the Earth, and that's what you do.
Yeah, it sometimes depresses me.
Are you finding dinosaurs we didn't even know existed?
We're finding creatures that leave the dinosaurs for dead. I mean, one of the things that excites me most, apart from being in a place like Australia, where within a half an hour I can be walking and exploring areas that no European has ever set foot on before, but certainly going into the past opens up four-dimensional worlds that we haven't even, for all practical purposes, begun to explore compared with the modern world.
You've talked about finding an amazing prehistoric creature, a crocodile. We're familiar with crocodiles. But this one climbs trees.
Yeah. Some people think that Australia is full of reasons to be horrified about going camping today. But yeah, walk back in time about 15 million years, and you wanted a really big hard hat on, because these guys, they were vicious, sort of dinosaurian-like crocodiles with long recurved teeth, but they weren't in the water staring at you. They were behind you in the forest, or worse, as you say, Boyd. Some of these guys were actually in the trees ready to drop on you from overhead. The original drop crocs. We had them.
A crocodile, a giant crocodile climbing trees. If you thought Australia had frightening creatures before, you should have been there, 30 million years ago. You would have really been scared. Karithi, exploration in the future is going to be done in ways that we didn't think of. It's not always going to be putting on khaki and a pith helmet and going out into the jungle. You're in a very populated country in India. And so how do you keep the animals that are wild and the billion people happy and living side by side in a very crowded area?
So where I work in the Western Ghats, we have the highest number of tigers and elephants in the world, but we also have 40 million people living aside tigers and elephants. And I think a big reason why we have this is cultural tolerance that we find in people. So I think, going forward, we need to find ways to make sure that you address this tolerance and make sure people's tolerance for wildlife remains in these landscapes, because I don't see any other country in this world with this many people still holding on to some of the most spectacular species on the planet.
Just a reminder to everyone on our Google Plus Hangout that we've got National Geographic Explorers on all 7 continents. We've got Africa with Paula Kahumbu. Karithi, you just heard from, is in India. We've got our Critter Cam team live in Antarctica, Bob Ballard, undersea explorer in the United States, Jane Goodall in England, primatologist. We got Mike Archer, you've heard from, a paleontologist in Australia, Cecilia Mauricio, archaeologist in Peru, and so we're very excited to have all these people together. Cecilia, you're one of our newer National Geographic explorers, and yet you're looking back in time instead of looking to the future. When you're digging through pre-Inca cultures, do you find things that will be beneficial to how we go forward as a civilization? Cecilia, is the past giving us an insight into our present and our future?
Yes, actually my research is about, it has to do with archaeology, geology, and environmental studies to understand the processes of a landscape and archaeological sites. In my case, in the research where I'm working on right now, it's an archaeological area, 5,000 years old. And the idea is to understand why this population was there at that time. Was the environment different? And because right now that environment is very dry, very hostile for human living. So the idea is understand why and what were the processes and the dynamics and the resources, natural and cultural, that made this all this development possible. So I'm finding that what we see is not what there was in place 1,000 years old, 5,000 years old. So that environment has been through a lot of processes, a lot of fauna that is not there, was there before, like sharks and sea lions, things like that. So it's a whole world that is there, and we need to get up.
And Paula, you're looking at our current environment in Kenya about sort of like what's going on in India, how people and wildlife can coexist. In Africa, of course, a big part of the economy in Kenya is making sure that the tourists come, and they want to make sure there's still lions there. You don't have as many people to deal with, but how do you convince the people that it's good for you to have lions as a neighbor?
Well, Boyd, Africa is a continent that is only very recently really taking charge of its natural resources. And the problem facing wildlife is just the same as what's happened all across the rest of the world. Human development threatens wildlife everywhere that it exists. And with Wildlife Direct, what we're trying to do is to say, yes, these incredible megafauna of Africa, these amazing landscapes and wilderness areas do need to be protected, and it requires a global commitment and global action, and that's what we do with Wildlife Direct. So working just outside of the city of Nairobi, I interact with a local community of Maasai people who traditionally kill lions, and just yesterday we met a family that had lost one of their sheep to lions. And we're engaging with this community and encouraging innovation from the people themselves. And we have a 14-year-old boy who has invented this amazing, simple, light flashing system that keeps lions away from his father's homestead. And this simple mechanism that cost him $10 to put together when he was 11 years old has now just spread right across Kenya. So what we've done is actually not just provided a solution, but demonstrated that the local community themselves actually have solutions. And so we're moving towards really encouraging, recognizing, and rewarding local innovation to enable communities to actually live with wildlife.
It sounds like he may be one of our newest National Geographic explorers, a 14-year-old boy who's developed on his own with no instructions or school books or computer access to learn how to do this, developed a light system to scare away the lions. We're getting questions in. Jane, you spent your life studying chimpanzees, but Lauren on Google wants to know, have you ever thought what you might have done had you not been an explorer? Had you not dedicated your life to studying these primates?
I would have been studying some kind of animal because that's what I wanted to do from the age of, well, just about when I was born. So I'm quite sure I'd have been studying some kind of animal. But of course, one of the main things I'm doing now links exactly back to the last topic conversation. That is working with young people, youth, around the world. We're in 132 countries now. We have a group in Tanzania that are keeping elephants away by smearing crushed up red pepper and elephant dung on the fences around the crops, and it's actually keeping the elephants away.
We got a question in from Joe in Florida. Bob, I'll direct this to you. He said, have you ever had a moment exploring where you thought, wow, I might not make it out of this situation?
Well, I must say in my early years of exploration, I was perhaps a little more reckless than I am now, and I was lucky to dodge the bullet a number of times, and enough times that I'm not pushing so hard as I used to. And I must say that the robotic technology has made my kind of business working at 20,000 feet beneath the sea a lot safer. So I would say the technology came in just when it needed to.
Hey, Bob, you've got to share with us. We're looking at some footage now of your new technology where you send the robotic platforms down with cameras and grasping arms, and you don't have to go down yourself. But in the early days, I don't
even have to be on the ship anymore. I can actually do it all from home. I can do it on my iPhone. I still love going out into the field, and I always will. But I can now explore much, much more by actually staying home.
Yeah, but I want you to share what it was like in the bathyscaphe when you went down in a little steel ball deep to the bottom of the ocean and were looking for deep sea vents and things. What was it like being inside of that, going down tens of thousands of feet?
Well, it can be scary. I mean, everything's fine when everything's working. It's when things don't work that it gets scary, and then all of a sudden you realize you're really in a coffin with a little peephole in it, and you got 6 hours to get out of there, and so it can get very scary. It's certainly cold.
Yeah, well, what happened?
I did it for a long time.
Tell me about the time that things did not go well, and you hear the creaking and noise, and you're not sure you're going to get back up.
Well, we were diving in the Cayman Trough in a bathyscaphe, and we were falling very fast, and we thought the bottom wasn't near us yet because we didn't realize we were coming down on the side of a giant volcano, and we weren't picking it up on our sonar. And we actually just crashed into it, and that ruptured our flotation tank, and all of our flotation gasoline started coming out. We were basically bleeding, and we had to get out of there as fast as we could, but it took us 6 hours to escape, and that whole time we were pretty quiet.
There's not much to say at that moment, but hanging on, will we make it to the surface? Greg, in Antarctica, we just sort of threw that out. You've been attaching cameras to leopard seals, but people may not know a leopard seal is not like the seal they might have seen bouncing a ball off its nose. It's a big carnivore, and it can come after you. So have you ever had one of them charge you?
Well, as it turns out, I have had a leopard seal charge me. This happened a year or two ago when I was working on the other side of the Antarctic down at in the Ross Sea. I was actually filming at this particular time when a leopard seal saw me from quite a ways away, and I knew that it was going to be interested in me, but all of a sudden, about 3 seconds later, it launched itself out of the water right at me, and fortunately it hit my tripod, knocked my camera over, knocked me over, but I was able to roll away from it before it got a little too interested, let's say.
And a leopard seal, what does that weigh? 400 pounds?
Well, oh no, leopard seal's 1,000 pounds, 1,200. What's the biggest one you've seen?
The one we were working on today was about 1,200 pounds, and I'd say the biggest one was close to 1,500 pounds.
Wow, so this is like a WWF move where the leopard seal launches itself into your face. And then you roll away. So how do you catch them and put a camera on them?
It's phenomenal. They're absolutely incredible animals. They have these absolutely huge mouths.
So, and Kyler, your job is to be the guy who has to go and attach the camera. How do you do that? We've got film of you putting one on a whale or using a long pole. That's when you need a 10-foot pole. But what do you do for the seal?
Yeah. Well, it'd be nice if we could use a 10-foot pole with the seals. Unfortunately, we haven't found a way to do it yet. So we're taking the critter cams, we zip tie some mesh, just a nylon mesh to the critter cam, and then we epoxy the mesh into the fur on the seal's back. It doesn't hurt them, it's not right on their skin, it's just we're using the fur to lock into the mesh with the epoxy.
But that means you have to catch the seal first. You have to hold it down while you glue a camera on.
Well, yeah, there's a little bit of a hiccup in that, yeah.
There was a step you missed, I think. And Doug, is that why you were there to catch the leopard seals?
Yeah, that's where I come into play. We've got a real interesting situation down here. because we've been losing ice very fast. These leopard seals are now hauling out on land near our site, and because we have better access to them, we've developed over the years a capture protocol, which we just minutes ago completed very safely, both for the animal and for the people involved. And yeah, the name of the game is to keep the seal calm and quiet while we can do our work and get out of there as fast as possible.
And make sure at the end that you still have all 10 fingers and 10 toes. I've got a question for Geography. This came in from Julia in Portugal. Julia says, I'm 18. I want to work with animals, but my parents consider it a hobby rather than a career. Do you find that people don't understand what you do? Now, you've got a little advantage, Geography, because your father was also a conservationist in India.
Yeah, so I'm not the typical wildlife biologist because I saw tigers and leopards when I was 2 years old, but I would, I think this is the typical reaction most young people face, and particularly young women, because, you're not taken seriously for a long time. So I would, I would like her to just go after this and do it if this is what she wants to do.
And Jane, when you started, it was really unusual for. Now we've got, as you can see by who we got rounded up here on our Google Hangout, we got a lot of women researchers and explorers. But when you started, you were pioneering that, and National Geographic gave you a grant. Did you find it difficult, one, to convince the other scientists and researchers that you could do the job, and the people at home, like your parents?
Well, first of all, my dream of going to Africa and living with animals began when I was 11. Everybody laughed at me. Girls didn't do that sort of thing. We didn't have any money, except my mother, who said, if you really want something and you work hard and you never give up, you find a way. So I got to Tanzania. I met Louis Leakey. He managed to find a bit of money for me to start. Then I saw tool using and tool making, and the Geographic came in with their first grant in 1961, and then supported the work for about 10 years. But the other scientists just thought of me as a National Geographic cover girl, and they said that I only did what I did because I had nice legs. Fortunately, I didn't really want to be a scientist. I wanted to learn about the chimpanzees. And Hugo van Lauwert came, and of course the Geographic funded his amazing photography and filmmaking. So finally, the scientists had to agree. But my worst fight was persuading people that it wasn't only humans who had personalities and minds and emotions.
By the way, I want to tell everybody we have a map up. If you go to our map on Google, you can see where all of our explorers that we're talking with today are, where they're located around the world, and you can just click on their spot and it will bring up information. You can learn more about the explorers. You can see still photos of their work. You can see videos of their work and get a better understanding of what they're doing, and maybe pick up ideas for yourself on how you can become an explorer, or what you might want to go and see in the world, and take your part in the new age of exploration that we're launching here at National Geographic now that we've covered the first 125 years.
You have to agree that the new geospatial mapping and GIS, GPS, and all this kind of stuff, that is just, it's providing so much new information about where to go and why to go where you go.
And how does that help in archaeology when you're doing this? Mike, does the new mapping give you a way of looking without actually walking across the ground and picking up rocks and turning them over?
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. I mean, remember that little scene out of Jurassic Park where they used a sort of a sounding device to discover a velociraptor underground? Well, technologies like that are actually coming good now. We're using satellite data, which has just knocked me out, what you can do with that. We found, well, we've been working in Riversley, one of the most interesting World Heritage fossil deposits in Australia. We knew about 40 square kilometers. I'm not bilingual anymore. I can't even remember how many miles that is, but it's big. And we thought that was the extent of the fossil.
25 miles.
We thought that was the extent of the fossil deposits, and then one of my PhD students came in exploring satellite data and pointed out to us, with a bit of a grin, mischievous grin, that there was an area even bigger than the one that the World Heritage Site covered, that we had never set foot in, and that all came from using satellite data to explore areas that no human being had ever set foot in before. It's amazing.
Paula, let me give you a question that Matthias on Google Plus has sent in, since it's in this theme of technology. He wants to know if technology, which is making exploring and exploration better and easier and giving us new insights, but will technology make hands-on exploring in real life obsolete? Will we all be able to do like Bob and sit in our computer room and watch it on TV?
I think that the really exciting thing about technology is combining it with the hands-on, you know, first-hand experience, especially when it comes to animals and even plants, you know, anything that we're working on. I think it's just given an incredibly new depth and new a way to actually to look at things from very different angles. But I think there's also a really dangerous side to technology, which I'm seeing. In Kenya, we've had a massive amount of exploration using the very same tools that we might use for exploring and mapping our forest areas or our habitats. The same technology is being used to explore and locate natural resources for the purpose of exploiting it. And we're seeing these natural resources just being, you know, plundered across the country, which I think is something that we haven't quite gotten to grips with. How do we deal with rights, community rights, landowner rights, national values and heritage versus short-term?
There's always two sides to these stories, so the technology is giving us new insight and making exploration better, but also can be exploited for exploiting the resources. And by the way, we don't often get our explorers connected on all 7 continents at the same time, so if you guys have questions for each other, feel free to jump in. And Jane, if there's something you've always wanted to know about Bob, now is the chance to ask him.
Well, I don't know. Bob, I think if you and I were sitting as we have before, there's so much. One of my passions, you know, when I was young, I wanted to study any animals. One of my passions was to go down under the sea, probably because of Jules Verne's and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But, you know, I would just like to have time to sit and hang out, and we maybe share some funny stories. And there'd be so many questions, I think, both ways.
Well, we need to get you, Jane, out on the Nautilus. It's in Turkey right now, in the shipyard, but it'll be in the Caribbean for the next 2 years. So I think we should have you come on out and go out to sea with us and explore with us. It'll be a lot of fun.
Well, that would be fun, wouldn't it? Yes.
Yes, it would.
And Jane, I think Bob should go look at the chimpanzees, don't you?
Yes. You probably should.
Well, I had the wonderful opportunity to go to where she had done her work, and also I had a wonderful chance to go where Diane Fossey worked. I mean, I love Africa. I'll go there anytime. I've spent a lot of time in Kenya. I'm an earth scientist, so I love all of Earth. Just happens that 72% of it's underwater, but you can get me to Africa anytime.
What, you're a geologist by training, Bob?
Well, I'm a geologist, and I think of the Earth as the biggest organism of all. I think of Earth as a living creature, but most of it's underwater, but I travel all over the land part too, so I love the whole enchilada.
Cecilia, well, if you could join one of our other explorers here, who would you most want to follow around for a week and see what they're doing if you weren't doing archaeology in Peru?
Can I choose all of them?
Yes.
1 week with everyone. This is amazing. I mean, I'm very excited. I'm very honored to be part of this group. This is amazing. I'm enjoying this very much.
Okay, now Greg, you get to go all over the world. You and the Critter Cam team, you and Kyler, because you put these cameras not just on leopard seals and not just. By the way, Greg and the team put them on penguins. So some of those underwater shots you saw in March of the Penguins, National Geographic's Critter Cam team. But we got a question from Bridget on Google. This is for you, Greg, and the team. What's the most difficult animal you've ever worked with? So it doesn't have to be in Antarctica. What's the most difficult animal?
Well, you know, until today, I would have said leopard seals are the most difficult. But it turns out that Doug has got it sort of nailed. So leopard seals are no longer on the height of my list. Looks like you're talking.
Yeah, you've put them on sharks. Didn't you have one guy who used to swim up to the sharks, even tiger sharks, and clamp the critter cam on without having the shark constrained? Oops, I think our picture froze in Antarctica. What a surprise, a picture froze in Antarctica. How unusual. Who would have expected that down there in that cold continent, the frozen continent? And Paula, while you're working with the Big Cat Initiative, do you actually have to get out on the ground and approach the lions to study them? Do you need some eyesight on them? It's not all done with technology. You have to follow them around, see where they're going, what they're doing?
No, I don't think I would want to walk around with the lions. And when lions are outside of the protected areas, they're extremely shy. They're quite fearful of people, so it'd be very hard to get close up to them. Inside the national parks, it's very easy because they're very calm. They know they're safe. So most of our work is done by observations of lions inside the parks, reports that come from the communities that we work with. We've given them cameras. They take photographs of lions, and they tell us when they see them and when they have incidents with human-lion conflict.
And a big part of what you're doing with Wildlife Direct is making sure that the rangers get their stories up about particular animals they're following, whether it's lions or any other of the wildlife in Kenya. And they're posting it. People can follow these rangers. They can help support the rangers and follow particular animals. And it's almost real-time being there without having to take the malaria pills is essentially what you're allowing people to do.
Well, it's an opportunity for people who care about wildlife in Africa to actually interact with those people at the front line, listen to the stories and participate and support them if they want to. And it's created whole new communities for conservation of people who can be sitting in New York and supporting somebody, for example, in Zimbabwe, working on big cats in Zimbabwe or elephants in Botswana. Yeah, so Wildlife Direct is not just rangers. We support, there are scientists and communities as well.
Is Bob still there? I'm trying to look at it. Yeah, there, I see Bob. Bob, we got a question from Adam on Google. He wants to know what might lie in the unexplored oceans that we haven't seen. Do you have any guesses? And let me expand on that a little bit and say, do you ever go looking for one thing and find something else that totally shocks you? That wasn't even part of the mission, but suddenly it's a bigger discovery than what you went to look for.
You know, those are the big home runs you're always hoping for. And I've been lucky. I've been at this 53 years now, and the discovery of hydrothermal vents, for example, and the giant tube worms, 10 feet tall, we had no idea they were there. Or when we found black smokers or Lost City. I mean, the real answer to the question is when they say, "What do you think you're going to discover next?" The honest answer is, I haven't got a clue. Because if I really knew, I wouldn't be a discovery. So that's what's really exciting, is to go looking for one thing and find something else that's much, much more important. And I just love that, and I can't get enough of it. So with our new ship of exploration, constantly exploring now, working with other ships to bring them into the Interspace Center, this year we'll have 6 ships exploring in real time, coming into the exploration room, and I just can't wait to see what they find.
Karithi, you got started, as we mentioned earlier, than most people in being an explorer because your father was a conservationist. How young were you when he took you out to track tigers for the first time?
I'm told I was 1. I remember things from the time I was about 2 years old. Yeah.
2 years old, tracking tigers. Will you do that with your kid?
Yeah, I have a 5-year-old, and she's seen 2 leopards and 2 wolves this year, so it seems like it continues on, and her excitement, you know, I mean, carries on, so.
By the way, Karithi was our 10,000th grantee at National Geographic. We make grants. We have been. obviously, if we've given out more than 10,000 now over the years to fund research and exploration around the world. She was number 10,000 for some of her work she's doing with tigers, studying them. And to inspire people to follow along, as you're one of the new explorers, is it important they get started early? Or can you switch careers midstream, do you think, and become an explorer?
I think you can switch careers anytime you want. And I actually didn't want to be a biologist of any kind. I wanted to be a lawyer or an architect. And when I went to do my undergrad in the US is when I found my way back to what my roots were. So I think if you're really passionate about stuff, it doesn't matter what age you are, you can, do it.
I think what's really, really important is to address the fact that our children now in the developed countries are spending less and less and less time out there in nature, more and more time doing virtual, and they're losing, they walk past amazing things without even seeing them. And this to me is very, very concerning, and that's why I spend so much of my time working with youth with our Roots and Shoots program, which does begin preschool. It goes all the way through university.
What do you see in the countries where the chimpanzees are? Do the kids walk by them there and ignore them too because they've always been here and we don't think of them anything special? Or is it possible to inspire them to say, this is important, we protect and preserve what we've got?
No, we are. We have our program in all the villages around the chimp areas where we work in Tanzania, Uganda, DRC, Congo, Brazzaville, Gabon, and Sierra Leone. And in all those places, we involve the young people. They're not actually watching the chimps, which are quite dangerous, but they're fascinated by them, they're learning about them. And just as in Kenya, they're learning that there are ways to live with this wildlife and how important the wild creatures are. Because tourism, of course, in Tanzania is very important too, and other countries want to develop it.
And Cecilia, in Peru, do you think, is archaeology a field that appeals to people? Are you inspiring younger generations to say, let's go look at the past? Is that of interest?
Yes, I think so. When I was doing my undergrad in Peru, there were some young people, some women studying archaeology, but now the amount of students doing archaeology or studying archaeology, it's larger. There are more and more people interested in the past, in preserving our archaeological sites, and I think this is something important for us because part of our history was discovered by archaeology, because the cultures that existed before the Incas, they didn't have writing. So, and thanks to archaeology, we were discovering what was our history before the Incas, before the Spanish, and that is something huge for a nation, I think.
Mike, we've got a question from Billy on YouTube about what impact do you think social media has on exploration? Does it help at all in your field?
Yes, certainly. It has a tremendous amount. And I think it's a reflection of the public's interest in living as well as prehistoric animals. And we do find that the amount of media coverage that attends explorations of this kind makes it easier for governments to actually give research grants, because they can then rationalize what they've done to the public, because demonstrably the public is interested in what's happening. So this kind of research that we're all involved in really is helped by media coverage. I think what National Geographic is doing at the moment, for example, in picking up an interest in the possibility of bringing extinct animals back to life. There'll be a big involvement of this in the next few months, and it's in a very exciting area. And you can imagine the media coverage suddenly thinking, hey, these things don't have to stay extinct, they might actually come back to life. That explosion will in turn help get research funds invested into these areas, and more discoveries will be made.
Pardon me, I'm just going to put my head back on it. It just spun around when you said bringing extinct creatures back to life. In fact, Mike is you'll want to stay tuned. Hang out with our Google Plus Hangout. It's going to get exciting because Mike's going to talk about a specific project he's got coming up. But we got explorers coming in and dropping out. So I want to say goodbye. Thanks to Karithi, who's been joining us, Cecilia in Peru, Karithi in India, Paula in Kenya. They're going to leave us now. Mike is going to stay with us. Jane is going to stay with us. We'll have some more explorers coming in. Bob, do you have a few more minutes you can hang out?
I do. Just a few. I've got to start exploring some more.
Okay, so we're going to keep you just a few more minutes. This is not only is it National Geographic's 125th anniversary, it's Bob Ballard's 22nd wedding anniversary this weekend. So congratulations, Bob.
Absolutely.
Just a personal note.
Thank you very much. I met my wife, as you know, at National Geographic. She was head of special projects, and I became one.
And that's why I want to say the biggest congratulations to Barbara for putting up with you for 22 years. That's harder than exploring in the jungles for 22 years, believe me. So Paula, Karithi, Cecilia, thank you very much for joining us. Mike, stick around. In fact, Mike, since you brought it up, explain how you're trying to bring back the Tasmanian tiger from extinction. How is that possible?
Well, I don't know if it is possible yet, but we certainly took great strides down that path. This was against the wisdom, if you like, the conventional wisdom of non-exploring geneticists who said this was impossible. But much that was regarded as impossible 10 or 20 years ago is suddenly starting to become very possible. I'm involved in another project we call the Lazarus Project, and we've not only got the DNA back of this animal, we have this animal actually being produced now as embryos. So we're steadily walking down this path. I hope there's going to be a very exciting outcome. But of course, as I discovered when I attended the workshop with National Geographic, there are many people around the world exploring similar initiatives. So this is an extremely exciting time, interfacing prehistoric discoveries with the modern world.
You're saying that we may have a Jurassic Park come to life. That's a potential new field of exploration. That is the new age of exploration.
Absolutely, and it goes beyond that, Boyd, because one of the other areas that's being explored at the moment is asking, while we're losing wildlife in the world at a terrifying rate, the question has been asked, can we rewild the world with things that have been lost from one place by introducing them from another? Can we enrich the biodiversity of the planet by understanding what was there before and what we might be able to reconstitute with some very careful research?
Wow.
We can reconstitute an environment if we can preserve the environment. I mean, that's the frightening thing, that huge areas are just being destroyed. And, you know, the hope is, yes, the resilience of nature, give nature a chance. And I was just reading about this plant that was discovered. So a little piece of the plant was discovered in an ice age ground squirrel's nest way down below the permafrost in Siberia. And the plant was reconstituted from 3 living cells. So what's possible in this field is enormous. But, you know, I'm fighting to save the creatures we have. Those are the ones that I'm passionate about.
Yeah, it's much easier to save the ones we have than trying to bring back ones that no longer exist.
I think yeah, boy,
that means protecting our environment and our habitat for humans as well as these animals, right, Mike?
Yeah, it is true, but I guess one of the realities that Jane's working with and struggling with, all the rest of us are doing the same thing. Africa has these problems. In Australia, it's becoming almost a mantra to say that, unfortunately, wildlife is no longer safe in the wild. As we seem incorrigibly unable to stop destroying natural environments, we come to a crossroads, and we have to ask, the explorers who are in this area have to ask, are we just going to let these things go because we don't seem to have the willpower or the commitment to conserve those environments, or do we recognize that problem and start exploring parallel strategies to keep biodiversity alive while we come to our senses? And there are so many new initiatives that are being explored. I'm an advocate in Australia, for example, of keeping some Australian animals as pets instead of just introduced cats and dogs. Many of them, I've had about 25 native animals as pets, from quolls to all sorts of things. They are more wonderful, cleaner, fun than cats and dogs, and yet it's illegal to keep them, while those same animals are steadily going extinct in Australia. I think we have to explore new strategies as well as new areas on the planet for maintaining the biodiversity that we're steadily losing.
Bob, when people look at the ocean, they think, well, there's something so big, we don't have to worry about that. That can absorb anything we dump into it. What's your take after going around and looking at it from the top and the bottom and from every side and every angle?
Well, you know, the deep sea is by definition extremely deep and isolated and protected. The problem is that's not where the problem is. The problem is in the shallow water, coral reefs, coastal regions. That's where the decimation's going, and that's quite honestly where your greatest diversity is, and some of the most beautiful creatures on the planet are the shallow water ones close to humans. So the good news is the deep seas is doing very well. The bad news is that, you know, that's not the coolest place in the world for some of the most beautiful creatures. So my concern is really what's happening in the coastal zones as more and more humans move back towards the ocean, and that's where the conflict is.
Years ago, you had a dream of having this ship that you've now developed that has the deep diving vehicles and the cameras and the lights. It was, at that time, it was almost science fiction when you thought of it. Now you've got this ship that you can go and you can sit at home and look at the computer screen and see the pictures that are being taken from the bottom of the ocean. Have you started to think what the next stage of development is going to be? Have you?
Well, more than likely, the next stage will be where the ships are automated. That actually you don't need crews to run the ships. They're more like sending probes to Mars. Having said that, I still love the ocean. I still love to swim in it and sail on it and recreate on it. But when it comes to going to work and exploring 72% of our planet's in total darkness, I think we're going to be moving more and more into remotely operated underwater drone systems, and then I enjoy right now. I look over my shoulder and I'm looking out at the wetlands in Connecticut. I actually like being on land a lot.
For a guy who spent so much of his time in the ocean, he's a landlubber at heart. Bob, thanks for joining us here on our Google Hangout. Go and enjoy the rest of your 22nd wedding anniversary weekend, and thanks for sharing some about the explorations you've done and what you're looking forward to in the future of exploration. Thanks a lot.
Roger that. I'll head off, and thanks a lot. Keep exploring. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. 125 years we've been sending people like Bob Ballard and Jane Goodall, who's with us, and Mike Archer, and now we've got some of our new guests. We've got Kenny Broad, who does undersea exploring in a little different way. Does it cave diving with scuba gear, specially designed scuba gear. Hello, Kenny. How are you doing?
Hey, Boyd. How are you?
I'm looking good. So you still haven't, all the exploring you've done, you still haven't found your hair. I see. That's good. Albert Lynn. Albert, are you there?
Yeah,
Albert Lynn, research scientist and engineer. We've been talking about how technology is changing exploration and social media is changing it. Nobody's doing that more than Albert Lynn has done in Mongolia. We'll talk to you a minute about your project. Welcome, Albert. Good to see you. And exploration is taking place in all kinds of ways. Aziz Abasera is doing it as a cultural educator. So when National Geographic looks at the new age of exploration, we're looking at it in a different way. He joins us from Jerusalem, by the way, where he is bringing the Palestinians and the Jewish population together in cultural tours in ways you wouldn't imagine. You're going to want to hear from him and ask questions for him. But Jane, let me go back to you for just a minute because we're getting a lot of questions for you. And the biggest one wants to know, how did you feel the first time a chimp interacted? And sometimes we put up video, and I think the most famous shot of you is a chimp reaching out with a finger going right towards your face. Was that the first moment of real interaction with a chimpanzee after you'd been studying them?
No, the first one came with dear old David Graybeard, the first chimp to lose his fear of me. And he actually let me touch him and groom him. We wouldn't do that now because we know that human diseases can be transmitted to chimps because we're biologically almost identical. But back then, when the chimpanzees had been running away, when David allowed me to groom him, when one day he reached out and took a fruit from my hand, he didn't want it, and then gently squeezed my fingers, which is a sign of reassurance. And then, as you say, when old Flo actually let her infant, her precious infant, come up and reach out to touch me, those big wondering eyes. I mean, these were moments that I think really enabled me to carry on with this study. It's now in its 54th year, which is pretty amazing.
Yes, it is. Let's just do some quick questions for everybody. We'll go fairly quickly here. When you're out in the field, Jane, what's the longest you've ever gone without a shower?
We have a lake, and so it's no problem at all. You just jump in the lake at the end of the day. There's no need to go without a shower.
What's the longest you've had to go without a shower in Australia, Mike?
Oh, 2 months. But then, I guess in the middle of that, I was able to jump in a bore drain, which was about 50% mud. It felt better than the 2 months without any wet at all.
I didn't know Australians showered.
Yeah, the 2 months is just sort of regular.
Yeah.
That's the English. The Australians decidedly are different than the English.
Got it.
Worry big one.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
so,
right.
Kenny, since you do most of your work in the water, I guess you shower every time you jump in, huh?
That's right. And
what's the most discomfort you? Do you have to camp out by some of these? Kenny explores in underwater caves and in blue holes. Do you have to sleep on the ground when you're near one of these places if it's very isolated?
Yeah, I guess a lot of times we start the cave diving at the bottom of a deep cave. So, for instance, in Mexico, I believe we spent about 21 days underground before we even started diving. So you're living at different levels underground. So you'll set up a camp where you're going back and forth every day. Then eventually you start living at that camp and shuttling gear lower and lower. So you're about almost 5,000 feet underground, and that's where you start the diving.
So you may go days in like a camping out situation.
Yeah, it's kind of the cheapest, deepest motel around, as some people say.
Boyd, if I can just bring you back to the showers in Australia, something just occurred to me that the one and only time that I had a very unusual shower in Australia was I was trying to capture a tree kangaroo. They don't look strong, but they are, and I had it by the tail as it was scooting up a large tree, and I thought I would be able to keep it on the ground. I didn't. It, in fact, went up the tree with me hanging on its tail, but its last message to me was to let loose and give me my first and only golden shower. It's another Australian way of getting a shower.
The kangaroo shower.
Well, we have many students who've been showered by chimpanzees.
Well, chimpanzees, they not only shower you, don't they throw their poop at you, Jane?
No, the wild ones don't. They're zoo chimps. They love throwing poop because they want anything to get interaction with these beastly people that grin at them all day.
High-tech research, but you also go out in the field. You've done a lot of climbing and field work. What's the longest you've gone without a shower?
Probably about a month, because Mongolia happens to be quite a dry place a lot of the time. So it's been up to a month at times, and it's kind of difficult because in Mongolia, when somebody says hello to you, if they want to give you a kiss, a lot of times instead of giving you a kiss, they'll smell you, they'll sniff your face, because your soul is represented in your smell, according to the traditions of the Mongolian people. So after a month of not showering, your soul smells a little bit more authentic, I guess.
They're getting the true essence of you. They're looking deep within you.
Yeah.
When they see a month of you coming out.
It'd be the same.
I'd be in a lot of trouble if I didn't take this moment or opportunity to tell Jane that my 12-year-old neighbor across the street ran out this morning specifically to make sure that I told you that you were her hero. And her name's Perlio, and she spends most of her time really volunteering at the wildlife communities around our neighborhood, and it really makes me think about why, for example, why I spend my time as an engineer running around, not showering in Mongolia, trying to do things that are based in exploration, and it has to do with that same moment of inspiration for me when I was a kid, and for her, she's going to go into conservation and wildlife research because of the influence that you had on her. But for me, it's the heroes of National Geographic, like Alexander Graham Bell, one of the founders of National Geographic, was an engineer and applying technology out, in interesting ways. So I just had to put that plug in there before we moved on to more shower stories, because she made sure that I would say that.
I'm glad you actually put that in there.
Yeah.
Say hello to her for me and tell her to be sure to look up rootsandshoots.org, because she can take part in that in China. We're in Mongolia.
Yeah, she spent a lot of time already listening to you speak. I think her mother takes her to every chance that she can to hear what you're up to. So, it's this idea that the new age of exploration has as much to do with curiosity as it has to do with responsibility, right? And I think you really shepherded that in, and it's why I'm here.
I understand that, Kenny, we may not have your connection for very long, so let me just go to you for a couple of moments. Explain, because you want to go down and see, we talked a lot about technology here, how you can send robotics down or take satellite photos to look at areas, but to get into an underwater cave, is the best way still to go down there yourself?
Yeah, luckily there's still good job security for everyone out there who's looking for a job, because you can't replace a human. You still can't replace a human with a remote operated vehicle, with submarines, with ground penetrating radar for most of the sorts of cave diving, cave exploration. It's just the manual dexterity, the actual decision making in a complex decision making when you're in a maze with zero visibility. You just can't run it from the surface. So it's one of these. It's an art combined with a skill where we just haven't been able to replace ourselves yet, which makes me happy.
And you may go down for extended periods of time. Are you using rebreathers that allow you to stay down for hours at a time?
Yeah, I mean, what we try to do is use the simplest technology possible, and I really am a technological Luddite. It took me about 5 times longer than the rest of the participants in the Hangout to figure out how to get on Google properly. So
I was the same. I was the same.
But so I mean, technology is changing diving. For instance, just yesterday I was diving for my friend's iPhone that he dropped off a bridge, and actually we couldn't find the iPhone, and on the way out we found someone else's iPhone.
So rescue mission for an iPhone.
Yeah, rescue mission for an iPhone. But in cave diving, it's the simplest technology that you can get away with. It's just you want to use, but now rebreathers and some dive computers are allowing us to really extend exploration both in time and in depth. So I do acknowledge it, but it comes with an increase in danger when you're relying on computers underwater.
And just to reiterate what Kenny does, if you're a scuba diver, if something goes wrong and you're diving out in the Caribbean at 40, 50, 60 feet, you've got enough air that you can just shoot to the surface in this crystal blue water and look up, oh, there's the surface, and I go. If you're in a cave, you might be down 300 feet, but worse than that, you might be a mile into it, so if you were to try to go straight up, you'll bump your head on the limestone. Why is the risk...
Are you implying that's what happened?
Yeah, well, you bumped it a lot, clearly. So why the risk? What makes an exploration worth extreme risk?
I think we each have, we like to justify what we do, that we make rational decisions. I'm doing this for science. I'm doing this so we better understand water resource management. I'm doing it to collect samples to reconstruct past climate. And those are all, I would say, post hoc explanations for what we do, and it's great. I can justify it. But the truth is, there's just something, I think, genetic that drives us to want to see what's around the next corner. And if that corner happens to be underground, happens to be underwater, I think some of us are attracted to those types of environments. And I'm sure if you had a psychologist, they could give you,
They could make a fortune on you.
They could make a fortune.
You would be on the couch 24/7, wouldn't you?
Exactly. Maybe it was something that happened to me during the birthing process.
And by the way, when you go into these caves, to find your way out, you string a line. It's like on a fishing reel of line that you have to string out so you can grab a hold of the line and follow your way out. once you get in there, because it can be, you can lose your lights, you can silt it up and you're not know where you are. So there's some extreme risks still involved in exploration. Even though we've got all the new technology and high-tech devices and rebreathers that allow us to stay underwater longer, there is still a bit of the, I would say, the glamour, the romanticism of old-fashioned exploring to be an explorer.
Yeah, let me just, Floyd, can I just, sorry, just to follow up, just to make sure something's very clear. It really is, there's frontiers and decades more of physical exploration to do in underwater caves, but please don't go in there without the proper training. It is not like open water diving in any way, shape, or form. So for anyone listening, it takes a whole different set of equipment configuration, training, and a lot of that's really, it's much a mental game and kind of getting in the right psychological mindset and practicing breathing exercises. So please, for anyone out there, you know, I'm glad to point them in the right direction for the training, but don't go in an underwater cave, even a few feet, because you'll turn around and see that you can't see your way out.
Yeah, I've been through the beginning cave diving training, and it's intense, and it's essential to understanding just how dangerous it is, and it makes you more cautious and more aware of what you're doing. So yeah, don't do that without the proper training. Aziz, now this is a complete new kind of exploration of what you're doing, and some people would say it's impossible, bringing Jews and Palestinians together to go learn about each other. What's the reaction there in Jerusalem to this idea?
As you said, it's a new exploration. I think when I got the phone call, even I was surprised about becoming an explorer. So no, I think it's important whenever you see, you know, we talk about saving the world, saving the planet, but we also have to remember, if we don't save our values and our morals and who we are as a people, and kill each other for reasons that are not worthy, then we have failed in our exploration. So I see Palestinians and Israelis. I grew up here, grew up Palestinian, and we so similar, yet we do not know anything about each other. And my first time meeting Israelis, I grew up Palestinian, I was so fascinated by learning different things and having that interaction. You know, you can call it exploring the enemy in some ways. And being able to know each other makes you less likely to want to kill each other, makes you less likely to want to do something against each other. So this is what I'm trying to do, and it goes great. I've had Israelis and Palestinians, kids playing soccer with each other. We've had them going and learning about each other's history, visit each other's homes, eating with each other, learning about each other. And it's fascinating to see how people become friends so quickly.
And you may have the most amazing story of how anyone became an explorer. We've heard how some of our people here on our Google Hangout today were inspired to go into this work. But I don't know if anyone else was brought to it by country music. Can you explain how that happened, how country music made you an explorer?
Yes, I love country music, and it makes me the weirdest Palestinian ever, or the weirdest Middle Eastern at all. Nobody relates to me here with that. No, I grew up in a family that was we didn't meet anybody on the other side. My brother was killed when I was 10 years old, and so that made me very much go on the extreme. When I was 18, I went to study Hebrew in an ulpan, which is where Jews who moved to Israel go to study. And we started talking. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was sure I'm going to learn Hebrew without talking to the people there, which was very smart. But slowly, you know, they forced us into conversations and made us ask questions about what we like. And I was, as I said, a big fan of country music. And I talked to a couple people there who knew who Johnny Cash is, which to me was already awesome thing. And it was through music, not through politics, not through, you know, we started talking about music, and that took us to going out for coffee and then getting to know each other. And it was amazing. It's totally opposite of what you think. Often we think it starts with, we have to agree on politics, we have to agree on how things work and who you are, who I am, 2 state, 1 state. It's not. It's relating to people as a human being that comes first.
The legend of Johnny Cash grows. His influence lives on. This is incredible. We have, obviously, we have people sending in questions. And by the way, you can send in questions to our Google Hangout on Google+, YouTube, and Twitter. Just use the hashtag NatGeo125. But we also have some people on video in London who have some questions. Daniel Pett in London, archaeologist, joins us, and Katrine Schmidt in Norwich, UK, is also here with a question. Karine, you have a question for any of our explorers?
Yeah, sure. I was wondering, because I had these moments already in my life, when you realized that dedicating your life to nature and science was the right thing to do.
Repeat that question one more time, Katrine.
I'm sorry. I was wondering at what time or at what moment in your life you realized that dedicating your life to nature and science was the right thing to do.
Okay. At the moment you realized that dedicating your life to nature and science was the right thing to do. Jane, when was that for you?
Well, as I've said, I just grew up knowing that I wanted to work with animals and live with them and write books about them. So it was something I knew all my life. But the decision, that the sort of moment that came to me was the life change when I left the forests and started traveling around the world trying to save whatever I could of the natural world where all the trees had gone that I once knew. And that was in 1986.
1986, when you realized that the changing environment. Mike, when did you decide you wanted to dig through fossilized dinosaur poop?
It was very easy for me, actually. I found I was not comfortable with people. I think I was born the wrong species, actually. I found I was much more comfortable with turtles and snakes and possums. So I think from about the age of 11, I pretty much turned my back on humanity and decided the animals were much more interesting. And that included, of course, the fossil animals.
And I love your dog.
Is that a schnauzer there, or is that a kangaroo?
No, actually, this is Noodle the Schnoodle. We're not allowed to keep native animals here in Australia, so this is my concession. I should paint Noodle with stripes, so at least I can think I've got my thylacine back here.
Or just put a pouch on it, make him a marsupial. Albert, what about you? Was there a time when you said, all right, this is what I want to do, I know I'm on the right path?
Yeah, it started out for me as kind of a personal journey to find out more about myself. I grew up as an Asian American in a society where a lot of my own history wasn't really taught to me in school. So when I grew up, I really wanted to learn more about it. And there was another point in my life when, as an engineer, I was finishing a PhD in material science and engineering, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And a very close friend of mine, basically came up to me and said, I was trying to figure out what I would do for work and how I would take on my life. And a friend just asked me, what would you do if you didn't have to worry about money? What would you do if you really just didn't have to worry about survival like that? What would you dedicate your life to? And within a week, I was on the road traveling towards Asia and eventually into Mongolia, with the idea that somehow technology that I learned about in my career would be applied to whatever my curiosity of my human exploration would be as well. And so basically at that point, I sold everything I had and moved into my car and started trying to do something a little bit different.
And I don't think we've actually detailed what it is that Albert does, which is really different. Got the idea that he wanted to try to find Genghis Khan's tomb, reputed to be, as you would imagine, large and famous, but never discovered. And it might be in places where the Mongolians don't necessarily, sacred sites or special sites, they don't want people just going around digging up. And so you develop technology to let anybody be an explorer. If you want to know how to be an explorer, you can actually help Albert do crowdsourcing. You post pictures and people look on them and try to spot anomalies. Explain how this works, Albert.
Well, it's a combination of two things. You touched upon both the idea that that these lands are so sacred, right? So some of the technologies that we develop are to look without having to dig. The Mongolian shamans believe that if you disturb the tomb of Genghis Khan, that you will cause this curse. This curse that'll, because his spirit still oversees their people and the world for that matter. I mean, there wasn't this idea of boundaries and barriers and walls in Mongolia. It was that they were all one people across the planet underneath the sky. And so they believe that his spirit, which was the founder of that nation, was still overseeing, or still believe is overseeing their people, and that if you disturb where he's buried, then you're going to cause some trouble, some really bad trouble. So how do you look without digging? So we came up with, you know, a series of ideas, and we applied technologies that were used for, you know, for surveying construction sites, and we applied them to, you know, these mountains, and try to look without digging, right? The second part is we don't know where exactly this tube might even be. It's in this huge, vast country or there's massive landscapes where people haven't really even been allowed to go to for over 800 years. In fact, there's this one area which has been, since the time of Genghis Khan, forbidden to travel to outside of the royal family, for anybody outside of the royal family. So how do you identify those few anomalies in this vast landscape? And so we tried to use satellite imagery, we tried to use other, you know, types of data that could look down on the Earth. And what we found was there's so much information out there. I mean, there's so much data out there that there's almost an impossible task of going through it. And that also is part of the frontiers of exploration, because, you know, satellite imagery now has the ability for us to look at any corner of the planet and try to investigate it, but there's so many corners, so how do you find them? And so we asked the public to look at little segments of satellite imagery and tell us what they saw in them. And we added all those little comments together, and we're still adding them together, and we're finding that people agree upon certain things, you know, that look abnormal. And we travel out to those places on horseback or you know, by foot sometimes, because it's very difficult to travel out there. And
so it's using that idea that a new pair of eyes can see something that if you've been looking at for a long time you might have missed. You've gotten so entrenched in looking at this map that you've missed something. But you bring new eyes in, fresh eyes, and different eyes, they might spot an anomaly, and if a bunch of them agree, then hey, let's go take a closer look.
And I just added up the stats about how much time people have spent on this, you know, and, you know, we look at everybody contributing as an equal valued part, because all those little data points are very, very important to us. But when you add up all their clicks and all the time that they spent helping us out, it's a collective of 18 years of human effort looking at satellite imagery, you know, all crammed into one little data source that we asked them to do. So it would have taken me 18 years of constantly staring at this satellite imagery to be able to do what, you know, what the community...
What's happened in, what, a period of a year?
Yeah, exactly.
Period of 1 year done, 18 years reduced to one. We got a question from Matthew on Google for all of you, that you've been to so many amazing places in your careers. And believe me, I know this is going to be hard to do, but if you got one that stands out as the most beautiful or peaceful, or just, do you have a favorite spot you like to go to? Kenny, do you have a favorite spot?
Yeah, those are tough questions all the time, and it tends to be the last one that I was at. But there's still a couple, you know, what it is for me, I think it's not a spot, it's being underwater takes me into a different kind of psychological realm, and it's this overall sensation. Maybe it's the lack of gravity, maybe it's because there's no email, cell phones, no offense, no Google. You can actually just, you know, digitally disconnect and disconnect in every way, shape, or form, and just be completely focused on the task at hand. So for me, it can be almost anywhere where there's no oxygen, no light. How's that?
That'd be the last on most people, where there's no oxygen and no life, no light. I would also say Kenny does like diving, though, in the Caribbean in the blue holes. That's because when he comes to the surface, there are little drinks with umbrellas in them,
exactly,
waiting on him on the boat.
Exactly.
That's part of the attraction. Aziz, do you have a favorite place in all of your travels?
It's hard. I love the Middle East, and I know it's not the most peaceful, as you know, but it's very, the history, the culture that exists here, the different cultures. I mean, there are groups that live here that people think they are extinct in Syria, the Syriac people, and you learn so much from these communities. So I love the Middle East, and again, I know it's not known for being peaceful, but I would advise everybody to come to here.
And if you go there, take one of Aziz's tours. You offer these to the public, right? People from
yes,
the United
and
States.
you can come with National Geographic too. We have an expedition now to Israel-Palestine to learn the conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the history and archaeology. We decided we wanted to do something different. Instead of the normal tours where you only learn about one thing, we're trying to put everything together. You'll learn about thousands of years of history. You'll learn about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and you'll learn how to become a peacemaker and a conflict resolution person.
Boy, you're just getting immersed in a new kind of exploration. You can be taking a vacation and be an explorer if you take one of these trips with Aziz. And Mike, in Australia, is your favorite place in Australia? You spent a lot of time living in the United States. Where's your favorite place?
Yeah, I couldn't say it is the United States. I mean, I grew up in Appalachia, and I certainly have wonderfully fond memories of making moonshine and playing banjos in Appalachia. but I'd have to say the places that really plugged my heartstrings were Patagonia, the remote areas in Patagonia, northern China, the rainforests in Borneo are magical. But at the end of the day, when my nose is buried in prehistoric worlds that are 25 million years old and the strangest creatures are peeping back, that's what gets my adrenaline running.
And I would think you'd find some of the strangest ones in Australia, even of the prehistoric creatures, because that's a land chunk that broke off from Antarctica, what, 38 million years ago, has been floating out there kind of isolated, and animals developed in a different way.
That's the fascinating thing about Australia. I mean,
since we have Jane on, and she's a primatologist, is there anything that went along the lines of a primate and one of the apes in Australia? Is there a comparison?
Yeah, actually, it's ironic. When the first explorers in Australia, European explorers, saw a koala, they thought it was a primate. So there were crossovers. People couldn't relate to the strangeness of Australian animals, so they tried to sort of overlay expected creatures on everything they saw. The thylacine became the Tasmanian wolf and so on. But the reality is there are no primates, and this is a huge mystery to us. I mean, there are primates on the northern doorstep of Australia. It crashed into Asia about 15 million years ago. Up went New Guinea. We've had a sort of an opportunity for primates to get into Australia, but apart from the human type of primate, none of them ever did.
And I introduced Daniel in London, and then I left him and forgot to get his question. Daniel, I know you've got a question for some of our explorers.
Good evening, Boyd. Thank you very much. Some of your explorers have already touched on this question already. You talked about your inspiration. I'd like to know who's inspiring you now. You're an established explorer or researcher, and whether the economic impact of the crisis now is actually impacting on your work, whether it's making it harder to actually go out in the field.
The great question. Jane, do you look today to anybody else who's out there doing work and get inspired by what they're doing?
Well, what I really get inspired by today is some of the young people who, some of them really have to struggle to get where they get, and they're determined to get out in the field, and they're determined to do what they want to do. And seeing them succeed and seeing them so enthusiastic and excited about what they're doing, I think that's my greatest inspiration.
Aziz?
I think my inspiration changed year by year. I'm inspired by, this year specifically, by my friends in Syria. I've been working in Syria for a few years and seeing what's happening there, and specifically my colleague Hind Kabawat, who's a Syrian human rights person who's been trying to bring the Alawites and the Christians and the Shiites and the Sunnis together and end this conflict through coalition and peace building, and she's been a true inspiration for me.
Albert, do you have anybody that you look to and say, I got to keep going? This is great work they're doing.
Yeah, I think I brought it up at the beginning when I cut in and was talking to Jane about my little neighbor across the street, but every time I see her light up with stories of exploration, it makes me realize that, there's actually something really good about what we're doing. And I think for that, her and her friends and my son and everybody, when we look at why we're doing all of this, there's got to be more than just ourselves. It's our future generations. So I think that's what it does for me. But also Kenny, Kenny's always been a bit of an inspiration, an inspiration to me as well, because he's just always having so much fun with everything. He's always like such a goofball, but doing the craziest things. He is Kenny. Before you, whether you know it or not, you are an inspiration in your goofiness.
Well, let me flip this question around the other way. Are there times you get discouraged and you think, Kenny, that none of this is making a difference?
Yeah, I mean, I make a lot of jokes, but I'm kind of a deeply cynical person in many ways, and sometimes I do feel that way. But then I hear stories like Aziz's story, or people who have overcome some incredible obstacles, you know, born into horrendous situations and have done amazing things. And I look at myself and say, don't be so pathetic. You know, I was, you know, born lucky in many ways into, you know, a stable situation, decent economic situation. So I say, well, that drives me to try to do better, quite frankly. And the other thing is, now I have 2 little kids, and I'm surrounded by small kids, and I do a lot of projects or with kids, and that really is a motivator. And you see how smart and truly good people are out there, and that kind of wipes away my cynicism for a while. So it's, you know, people like Aziz and a lot of the you know, the Nat Geo family. Actually, you know, when we all get together once a year in Washington, it's almost like getting a boost of adrenaline that runs through for the whole year through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we've just brought.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Add to that, Kenny, because, you know, there's a whole group of explorers at National Geographic that aren't on the screen that, you know, I think are who we feed off of, right? You know, for example, my main partner in Mongolia, Fred Hebert, he's an archaeology fellow at National Geographic, and he and I in Mongolia, you know, when we're together, we feed off of each other's excitement. And while he's an archaeologist and I'm an engineer, we're coming up with ways of trying to approach new challenges. And it's that personal friendship among each other that I think is the most exciting.
And while we've gone to all 7 continents today to talk to some of our National Geographic explorers, this is just a little inch deep of what we do here. As I said, we've given out over 10,000 grants, people we work with, some we call explorers in residence, some emerging explorers, young explorers, and they're out there on it in multiple numbers on every continent all the time doing work and doing the most amazing, fascinating stuff. It is the new age of exploration. It's ahead of us. We've taken pictures of the Earth, and Google puts them up. The pictures are so good now, you can go down and see what your neighbors are barbecuing on the grill. That's how detailed they are. So, know if you want to go over and invite yourself to dinner. But there's more to know than that. Even looking at things we've looked at before, like Albert's doing, if you look at it with more eyes, you can see it in a different way and make new discoveries. Mike, is it ever like, oh, it's just another day at the office for you, or is it always something that keeps you motivated to show up and do what you do every day?
Look, any excuse to get out into the bush or wild areas or interact with a wild animal, I'll drop anything to have that happen. And that includes wild students. The whole group are really interesting. There's so many things to do. I don't regret mortality. On the other hand, it really annoys me that I've only got one life to spend exploring all the interesting things that are out there waiting to be found. I am an explorer junkie. There's no question about it. You get that way a bit. And it just means that's your fix. I have to get out of this chair and out of the house on a regular basis, or I'm in trouble. It's just one of those things. You get hooked on this.
We've gotten, as I said, we've gotten a lot of questions in on our that people can send in via Google or Twitter or Facebook. One of them, Kenny, specifically from you, from Andrea, who wants to know, in these caves, in these tight situations, have you ever been stuck?
Yeah, I've been stuck a couple times, never obviously for too long. There's a couple things. One, water is sort of the universal solvent. So if you can keep calm, eventually you can wiggle your way one way or another. If you're diving with someone else, we have signals. So I don't know if you can see, but if we cross our legs back and forth, it might mean pull us out. If you put them together, it means push. So we've got some signals. But I always, you know, we dive alone quite a bit, but I try to dive with other people, and I try to dive with people who are bigger than me. I try to make
so they can push, push.
So I make sure that they go in the hole first.
That's even better. If they get stuck.
That way, if they made it through, then I know I'll have no problem. I just got to get in front of them on the way out. And make
so I guess you want to dive with me.
Yeah, that's right. I'm always looking for a large frame dive partners.
And sometimes since I've done a little cave diving, I know you actually have to take off your gear, shove it through the hole in front of you, and then you come through, or you go through first and pull the gear in after you.
Yeah, a lot of times, because I mean, I acknowledge it might sound completely ridiculous, but you do that, but you open up, you might push through a hole that's, you know, not much bigger than a basketball, but then you come out into a room where you can land 3 747 side by side, and you don't know what you're going to find, whether it's, you know, paleontological remains, whether it's cave formations that help us reconstruct past climate. I mean, you just don't know. These are time capsules, and what's around the corner is always amazing.
We've talked to, and this question keeps coming up, a lot of people want to know about the most dangerous thing, or the time when you were the most scared or the most concerned about what might happen. We've asked some of the other members of our Explorer team what they've gone through, but Aziz, I thought, because you're doing a different kind of exploration, but it is equally fraught with potential for peril. Have you ever had moments where you looked around and said, now I've gotten myself into a situation where I'm going to have to be very careful?
Too many times. But it kind of gives me the adrenaline, so it doesn't scare me. I've been probably in areas of crossfire, shootings, things 50, 60, 100 times I can't count. The last time, though, that was like this, I was working in Afghanistan, and I was working on a project with the former president, Rabbani, in Afghanistan. And right after I left him, he was blown up and assassinated. And at that moment, I thought, yeah, I could have been there when that happened. But I went back a month later, so obviously I'm being too stubborn and sometimes irrational. But I enjoy the danger element of my work. I'm going next to the theater.
You realize the importance of your work. The work is the most important part.
And I think at the end, it's dangerous because somebody has to do it, and you're either gonna do something about it to change it or not. My next trip is gonna be to the Syrian border, to Turkey, to the Syrian border, to work with the refugees there, and the area that we're going to gets bombed quite a bit. But I think you have to overcome fear to be able to do what you want to do.
By the way, we're getting a lot of questions for this session, so we really thank all of you. We'll refer to you as our new explorers, those of you who are watching this, because clearly you're interested in this planet if you're tuned into this Google Hangout, Google Plus Hangout. And we do these every month, so check it out. We don't always do it with people on all 7 continents at the same time, but thank you for joining us, and be sure and tune in each month to the session. I think the next one is coming up in February 8th, in fact. In fact, on February 8th, we're going to be talking with archaeologist Guillermo de Anda from an ancient Mayan cave. He may be looking for those pages of the Mayan calendar that didn't turn up after 2012 because we were still here. But we'll find out what he's doing in the cave in Mexico. So check out that Google session. And Daniel, as long as you're still up there, do you have another question you'd like to ask before we go?
I'd like to ask Albert a bit more about the social media based around your search for Genghis Khan. I work with digital media in London looking at crowdsourcing as well. It's always had a big impact. But are you managed to reach people through new media as well, so audience, and reaching them on the social networks in different countries?
Yeah. Well, you asked how did I get people to participate? Is that what you're asking?
Well, are you getting more people to participate using social media for your project, or is it just through publicity and word of mouth?
Sort of, how do you get the people to sign on and help do the crowdsourcing? How are they hearing about it?
You know, it's actually partly because National Geographic has such a strong online presence. You know, the digital media group has been doing a lot of really amazing things. But also, I think that in general, people are just curious and excited to participate in a way that that they haven't been able to do before. So it wasn't that hard to recruit participants. You know, I mean, the last 125 years, exploration has in some ways been held as almost an elite sort of thing, right, where only a coveted few get to go into the field. And I think the next 125 years is going to be far different, in which, you know, everybody's going to be necessary in making a difference. And so when we opened up this website and we allowed people to participate, it wasn't like we really had to recruit. People were hungry to go and participate, you know, and I really think that's going to apply in all sorts of exploration all across the board. And that, in some ways, is, you know, the frontier part, right? It's how do we work together now in order to combine that curiosity with the responsibility.
And let me mention, if you saw any of the promotion, there was a lot of promotion for this particular Google Hangout, because it's a big deal. It's the first all 7 continents linked together with explorers from National Geographic on all 7 continents, celebrating our 125th anniversary, which we look at as just the beginning. We're ready to launch the new age of exploration. If you saw some of the publicity for it, you may have noticed that James Cameron, the director and National Geographic Explorer, underwater explorer, was going to be with us from Australia, but he was working on a project for National Geographic that's got him tied up, and with the time change he couldn't make it. But to Australia, more than well represented with the presence of Mike Archer. So, Mike, thanks for joining us and talking about dinosaurs and crocs in trees, jumping out of trees. It just, and lets us all be glad that, as I said, we weren't around in Australia 38 million years ago.
But he wants to bring them back. He wants to bring them back.
Bring them back. He's going to bring them back. Yeah, you're bringing back the Tasmanian tiger. Jane wants to know if you're going to bring back the crocs jumping out of trees.
Oh, look, don't tempt me.
Don't tempt you?
We sometimes think, compared with Africa, that the bush in Australia is a little bit tame. We don't have things at the moment that gobble you up when you turn your back on them. So, yeah, a couple of things like that would make life much more interesting here.
Now, you don't have things that will eat you. You've got things, though, that will poison you. You've got all those venomous creatures that have been the subject of many National Geographic specials, the most venomous creatures on the planet in Australia.
It's true. Technically, we've got the most poisonous snake in the world. We got the only spider that'll nail you in a couple of hours. But you don't see these things. I mean, it's a big bit of hype, actually, about Australia. This is one of the tamest, most gentle continents on the planet. Perhaps, well, no, I'd have to even say even more so than Antarctica. There's no leopard seals here that'll swallow you up when you stare over the edge of the continent.
Yeah, you don't see them coming. I think that's what you mentioned. You don't see those spiders, those blue ring octopus, the what have you got? You got the
box jelly.
The box jelly.
The 117.
The tiger snake.
Dart snail.
Yeah, we know them all.
I've been bitten by a few of these things, and I'm still here.
I'll tell you, I was there recently, and it was great.
But then you've also got Bondi Beach outside of Sydney, so what more could you ask for? One of the most beautiful cities in the world. Hey, thanks to all of you for joining us for this Google Plus Hangout. It's been a great session talking to people on all 7 continents. And Google Plus, National Geographic, we do this every month, not with, as I say, 10 or 12 explorers at once, but you get to know them in depth. And don't forget, you can go on the Google and look at the map where you can see where all of these people are, where they're doing their work. Click on the dot, and you can bring up information about our explorers, see pictures and a video of what they're doing in the field, the exciting stuff they've done, and what is coming up in the future. You've made me want to go out more, come hang out with you in the field, which we will be doing. And by the way, we talk to all these people on our radio show as well, National Geographic Weekend. So you tune in every Sunday, noon Eastern on Sirius or XM satellites. You can follow us on iTunes. We're a free podcast. So tune into National Geographic Weekend, and we have in-depth conversations with all of these explorers. And I think you can see we want you watching this to be explorers too. The best way to begin, join us here at National Geographic Society. Become a member. Go to nationalgeographic.com, find out how to become a member. Don't forget February 8th, the next Google Plus Hangout. So guys, thank you for spending a little time with us on this Sunday and getting us inspired to explore more. Jane, you've been an inspiration to all of us for many years, and then Aziz, you're starting out more recently, but just as inspiring the stories of what you're doing and what you're accomplishing. So thanks to all of you. See you on the next one of these.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, Jane.
Yes?
Are you still there? I can't let you go. Sorry. Give us a chimp greeting. This is the big moment. Everybody wants to hear you do the chimp. Say goodbye in chimpanzee.
Well, it's a greeting, really. They don't say goodbye, but the greeting to all of you. Hi, guys.
We'll pretend that's from Hawaii, where hello means goodbye and aloha means both. Thank you, Jane.
Bye.
Thanks to everyone, Aziz, Albert, Kenny, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Same here. Thank you.
Bye.